Please check the trigger warning in the description.
Chapter 8. Nobles. Thorn. Captain Thorn wiped the sweat from his brow and gazed up at the clear sky where the 7 stars beat down oppressively on the Taymore Terra. He was returning from the Firestone mine several miles outside the colony's border. After the destruction of the colony's defense shield, the mine had become far too dangerous to remain in operation. It was located too far outside the village for them to effectively defend, and lately it felt like monsters were being drawn toward their outpost in hordes. As it was, they were struggling just to keep the people inside the colony's borders safe. They had been forced to shut down the mine indefinitely. As captain of the Taymore Colony Reserve, Thorn was charged with overseeing the mine closure and securing the equipment. On his way to the command center building, Thorn passed the military shooting range. A dozen soldiers practiced their aim on a variety of targets. The engineering team had rigged a few of the targets to a simple water turbine, allowing the soldiers to practice with moving targets. Standard infantry rifles weren't the most accurate weapons under the best of circumstances, so Thorn was glad for the improved training. No grosswing was going to sit still for you while you prepared to shoot it. As he watched the soldiers practice, a loud bugle sounded from the edge of the colony. The men and women quickly abandoned their exercises and rushed to answer the alarm. The recent destruction of the colony's monster defense system had left the whole colony vulnerable to attack. Thorn had felt this every day as he oversaw the closure of the mine. His body ached with the strain of repeated fights, along with the cuts and bruises left in the aftermath. His exhausted brain wished he could somehow harness the monster's energy into powering the mine. That would be nice. Thorn climbed the stairs to Colonel Meadows' office and thumped on the door. The colonel's voice sounded tense as he called the captain inside. He entered the room to find Meadows sitting across from a well-dressed woman who looked badly out of place in the Taymore colony. She wore a silk kimono embroidered with gold thread. A large blue gemstone dangled from an elaborately carved silver pendant around her neck. She was on the short side with a delicate figure. Her ivory complexion almost matched the platinum blonde hair that was draped over one shoulder. The young woman had the confident bearing of someone who had been born into wealth and was accustomed to getting her way. She was currently sitting with her arms folded and an air of cool disapproval on her face. Thorn cleared his throat as he addressed his superior. "Colonel Meadows, sir, I am here to report on the state of the mine. All equipment has been secured and all personnel have returned to the colony for reassignment." "Perfect timing, Captain. We were just discussing the mine. This is Duchess Lillian Astor of Paracera." Thorn could detect a faint hint of irritation in Meadows' voice as he continued. "Duchess Astor has come to the Taymore colony for a tour of the mine. It seems her family are big investors in the project." That was odd. Wasn't the Taymore colony a government project to extract firestones? He hadn't realized there was private funding involved as well. Meadows' eyes flicked toward Lady Astor with a hint of disdain. "I was just explaining to Duchess Astor why a tour of the mine would be impossible at the moment." Lady Astor interrupted. "This is utterly unacceptable, Colonel. The whole purpose of the Taymore colony is to support the extraction of firestones from the surrounding area. Yet you are telling me that you have spent the last several weeks shutting down the mine in favor of the colony? I fail to follow your reasoning, Colonel." Thorn winced internally. The military outpost had its hands more than full dealing with the loss of the defense shield, the resulting monster attacks, and the threat of a diplomatic meltdown with the Invicti. If they were going to be forced to run the Firestone mine on top of all this, it would lead to even more danger and loss of life. "The mine requires the colony to function." Meadows' voice was labored as he tried to break down the situation. "If the colony were to fall to monster attacks, the mine would become inoperable as well. By protecting the colony, I am protecting the mine's future. The current closure is only a temporary measure until our defenses are back on their feet. Once we have completed the perimeter wall, our soldiers will not be spread as thin, and we will be better equipped to defend both the mine and the colony. Until then, the mine will remain securely closed." Lady Astor flicked her long, delicate fingers. "And how long will that take, Colonel? With the size of the Taymore colony, I am guessing months? Years? There is something you do not seem to understand. Time is money. My family bought into this project because it was meant to be a profitable enterprise. Do you know what this project is every moment the mine is not running? An expense. It is a very significant expense and a leech on my family's resources. Her eyes dug into him. If you are incapable of performing your duties, you can be replaced with someone competent. Meadows clenched his teeth. I assure you that we are doing everything in our power to secure Taymore's defenses as quickly as possible so that we can reopen the mine. Until then, we need every available resource to be put into defending the colony. Lady Astor sipped slowly from the cup of water in front of her, allowing the silence to drag on uncomfortably. You say you are doing everything in your power to restore the colony's defenses as quickly as possible. So, what is your plan then, Colonel? How are you proposing to repair the colony's defenses and reopen the mine before you completely bankrupt my family? Lillian Astor raised her eyebrows and gazed at Meadows expectantly. We are constructing a wall around the outer borders of the colony. Meadows's tone was measured. Once the wall is complete, we will not need to dedicate as many personnel to the perimeter watch. If you really care so much about getting the mine reopened, then why doesn't your family send us a replacement monster defense crystal? Lady Astor waved Meadows' suggestion away dismissively. My family is already underwater as it is with this investment. Do you really expect us to pour more resources into the project? Besides, there is currently a shortage of defense crystals. The primary manufacturer had an incident at their main plant, or some such. That is beside the point. As the leader in charge of this operation, I expect you to be more proactive in finding solutions to this problem. Captain Thorne cleared his throat. He was becoming increasingly uncomfortable as he felt like a fly on the wall listening to their conversation. Meadows welcomed the distraction. Captain Thorne, the Duchess has decided to stay at the colony for an unspecified amount of time. See to her accommodations during her stay with us. He turned back to the Duchess. Lady Astor, I am sure you must be tired from your long journey here. We can continue our discussion once you have had a chance to settle in. Perhaps you would like a tour of the colony and the construction of the outer wall? Lady Astor smiled at Meadows knowingly. You are not off the hook, Colonel. I expect to see tangible progress. You will not get me out of your hair until that happens. And you will, Lady Astor. The Crown's investors can be assured that no effort will be spared in restoring functionality to the Firestone mine as soon as is humanly possible. Lillian Astor looked at Captain Thorne, seemingly for the first time. Her blue eyes appeared to be looking through him, staring straight into his soul. A bit dirty, but I suppose you'll do. Lead the way then, Captain, did you say? Thorne squirmed internally, suddenly extremely conscious of the grungy uniform he had worn for days as he defended the miners. He wished he could disappear.
Tira. Tira tossed restlessly on the traditional catkin bed, comprised of a puffy mattress and numerous fluffy pillows. In her dreams, she saw her cell in the airship, the crash of thunder, the pounding as the ship swayed side to side with the heavy wind. Tira flinched at the crashing of one of the cannons, followed by the cries of the crew. From their cells in the ship's belly, the 50 heavy labor-grade slaves could only guess at the conditions the vessel faced outside. When Tira and the others were packed onto the ship weeks ago, they hadn't even been told the name of the Terra where they were going, much less the itinerary details of the trip. Heavy labor-grade slaves may be prized for their market price, but that didn't earn them any more information about their futures. After being sick innumerable times in the straw that covered her floor, Tira's body was suddenly flung across her cell. A gut-wrenching crack shot through the entire airship. A dozen terrible thoughts flashed through Tira's mind. Were they at war? Had they collided with another airship? What if it was a dragon? Her wrists ached at having the weight of her entire body thrown against them. Dangling precariously from the wall by her chain, she pictured the airship spiraling downward through the interterra void, falling forever into nothingness. The whole world seemed to spin as the ship tumbled through the air. Tira's body was rudely slammed into the floor this time, before the movement finally came to a halt. They had stopped. At least it meant they weren't falling through the void. Her momentary relief was broken by the screams of pain from the other slaves in the cargo hold who were injured in the crash. Another awful thought crept into her mind. What had happened to the crew who were above deck? What if they had been killed or badly injured in the fight? Without the sailors to bring them food, they would all be doomed to a slow death from thirst and hunger. Other than the cries of the slaves, the only other sound was the pounding of rain on the outside of the ship. From the isolation of her cell, she strained her ears to hear anything else from outside. Faced with the only Indatsu slave in the batch, the sailors had pulled out all the stops on Tira's restraints. Evidently, the sailors had dealt with members of her race before and were not taking any chances. Now more than ever, she wished she could have ridden in the main holding area with the rest of the slaves. Maybe someone else would have figured out what was going on. At the very least, she could face the situation without feeling so alone. Finally, her ears picked out the familiar voice of two of the sailors coming down the corridor. She let out a heavy sigh before straining to make out their conversation. They were annoyingly far away, and she only caught a few words. Crash land, terra, cursed beasts, gross wings. She could sense the urgency from the tone of their voices. Their footsteps pounded louder as they approached. Sir, I would like to suggest that we release the slaves. It would give us a better chance of fighting off the cursed beasts, and with our current numbers, we need all the help we can get. The other voice snapped back. Ridiculous! And have them out to kill us too? That's the last thing we need right now is a slave rebellion on top of everything else. The voices faded as the two sailors continued on down the corridor. Their words brought hot terror to Tira's veins. Something was seriously wrong. Something that the sailors were concerned they could not overcome without the slaves' help. The senior officer's last comment left her feeling baffled. It had never crossed her mind that slaves might intentionally attack their invicti masters. In her mind, such actions would inevitably lead to a horrible and swift demise. To do so would be seeking one's own death. In the following hours, she could only listen as the cries of monsters and the death screams of the sailors carried to her cell. The other slaves were next. She would never be able to wash away the sound of the trapped slaves being killed and eaten less than a dozen meters away. It was the same day as the crash, when the first gross wing stuck its head into her cell. With both hands restrained by a length of chain, her first instinct was to freeze in terror. The next instant, the creature lunged forward, forcing her into motion. A solid kick to the creature's head sent blood and brain matter spraying across the walls of her prison. More of the beast came to give her a try, and eventually started to eat the ones that had come before them. It took an unbelievably long time for them to realize attacking her wasn't worth it. Nonetheless, they still came to check on her as she slowly grew weaker each day. She hadn't dared to close her eyes, even for a moment, for that would be the moment the Grosswings took advantage of her weakness. Tira! Tira! A faint voice dragged her from her tumultuous dreams. Light poured in through the window into the Belvedere's home. Mrs. Belvedere was looking down at her with a gentle expression. Good. You're awake. I made food. You should come and eat something. You've been sleeping all day. Tira sat up in the bed, her shoulders automatically hunching. Her fingers found the old scar on the side of her neck and tugged the collar up to cover it self-consciously. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the window. Based on the angle of the light, it must be mid to late afternoon. Climbing down from the loft, she approached the oversized wooden spool the Belvederes used as a table. A pot of soup sat in the center beside a basket of bread. The aroma made her mouth water. She hesitated and looked at Mrs. Belvedere. Go ahead, eat up. The catkin poured a bowl and set it down in front of her. The girl's hunger soon overpowered her, and she began to devour the soup greedily. Mrs. Belvedere ignored her silence and continued to chatter cheerfully. That captain said they offered you a job as an apprentice to the engineering department. But for now, you should focus on regaining your strength. By the look of it, you haven't had a good meal or rest in half a year. Work can wait until we have put some meat on those bones, that's what I say. She busied herself with tidying random things around the kitchen as she continued. Of course, it's good for youngsters to get a head start learning useful life skills for when they grow up. It would also give you some spending money to use on whatever you'd like. Tira's eyes widened. Spending money? It was the first time she had been offered money in exchange for labor. Work had always been something that had been expected of her. a given that was just what she did. The idea she could get something in exchange was a strange and extremely appealing prospect. She gulped down the bite of bread she had just taken and peered up at Mrs. Belvedere. This talk of earning money was fascinating. What could she use it for? The ideas raced through her mind. Her limited life experiences did not help in the matter. One of the children in the slave center had found a shiny glass marble once. It had a colorful pattern melted into the center. Perhaps if she had a job, she could make enough money to afford a beautiful glass stone like that. Mrs. Belvedere laughed at the bulgy-eyed expression on Tira's face. "What does that look for, Tira? Did I say something strange?" Tira swallowed before asking softly, "When can I start?"
Thorn. Captain Thorn fumbled through his memories, struggling to remember what to do with members of the aristocracy. It had been quite an abrupt change to go from grinding transportation duty to suddenly being expected to be eloquent and refined. This was worsened by the fact that he was almost never called upon to perform these types of ceremonial duties. He tried to think of what housing the military had that would be suitable for a wealthy noble. "Is that a tavern?" Lillian Astor nudged Thorn and cocked her head toward the ugly acorn. "Yes, but it's nothing fancy. I don't think it would be your type of thing." "Nonsense. You have no idea. I slum it all the time back home. Come on." Lady Astor took Thorn by the hand and led him forward. Her action sent a wave of heat to Thorn's face. Isn't this a bit too forward for a member of the nobility? He was nonetheless swept along by the lady's tremendous force of will. A wind chime constructed from broken pottery pieces clattered cheerfully against the door as they pushed their way inside the tavern. The barkeeper, Ta'ajib, looked up at them with a hint of surprise as his eyes fell on Duchess Astor. "2 ales, strong?" Astor tossed a couple silver coins onto the bar as she sat down and turned to Thorn. "Drinks are on me, Captain. My treat." Captain Thorn watched Lillian Astor gulp the ale, feeling bewildered at her incongruent behavior from what he had observed in the colonel's office moments before. "So, Captain, tell me about yourself. What brings you to the Taymore colony?" she asked. Thorn shifted nervously. She seemed important, and he wasn't sure how he should behave in the casual setting. "Well, I was assigned to the colony a number of weeks ago. I originally served in the 17th Regiment of the Roglin Army." "Ah, the Roglin Army. That's nice." She took another long gulp of her ale and replaced the tankard on the bar. "I like you, Captain. You seem like you have a good head on your shoulders. So tell me, what ideas do you have for restoring the colony's defenses?" "Well," Thorn began, "I think that the best solution would be to repair the monster defense systems. It is a far more efficient system than having to depend on walls and manual patrols." Lillian Astor burped and nodded. Yes, I agree. I like where you are going with this, and how would you propose to do that?" "Yes, so I have been spending a lot of time with some of the miners lately." He began to warm to his topic. "From what they have told me, there could be some crystal deposits farther inland on the Terra. If we could collect enough of that crystal, I believe our engineering team could jury-rig a substitute for the main device that was destroyed." "Ah." Lady Astor paused for a long time as her eyes drifted off into space. "How interesting." Ta'ajib slid over to them, sporting his best smile. "So, what brought such a lovely lady to grace us with her presence?" Lillian Astor fluttered her eyelashes at him and smiled. "Correct me if I'm wrong, but you look like a Quinty. I have read all about your cultural history. I'm a big history buff. It's a professional hazard of having a royal education." Ta'ajib beamed proudly. "Yes, indeed. My mother is from the Quinty mainland, and my father was a man of the land here on the Taymore Terra." "How fascinating. Tell me everything. You must have so many stories." By Lady Astor's second ale, Thorn felt like he had a degree-worthy knowledge of the ancient Quinty civilization, which he now knew was referred to as the Quilcuddy. Their capital city, Chrysia, was a hub for philosophers, poets, and politicians. The Quinty greatly cherished this stage of their civilization's development, and many of the ancient philosophical works were still taught today. Ta'ajib was currently describing the works of Anti-Sophocles, who was a very big deal for some reason. Yes, like most creative geniuses, Anti-Sophocles was underappreciated in his time. Sadly, his most famous work, The Onion's Root, was never completed. Anti-Sophocles was killed in the Second Siege of Chrysaea before he could finish the manuscript. Lady Astor interjected at this. Ah, the Second Siege of Chrysaea. That reminds me of something. Isn't there a story from around this time of a device that was said to have the ability to repel monster attacks? Yes, it is known as the Tideweaver. Ta'ajib beamed. Every Quinty child knows and loves this story. It is said the device was being constructed in the countryside outside Chrysaea. However, it never reached the capital city. After the city was destroyed in the Second Siege, the Quilcuddy civilization was thrown into chaos. Rivaling groups began to fight among themselves to try to gain control over the Tideweaver. The device was eventually stolen by a group of monks and hidden in a secret location in an effort to stop the fighting. So where is the device located today? Lillian Astor's eyes were like a tiger's locked on its prey. The device's location is still a mystery. It is the debate of scholars throughout the Quinty mainland. The Quilcuddy land is now heavily infested with monsters, making the question that much more of an unsolvable mystery. Ta'ajib was clearly enjoying himself. But surely there must be clues about the device's location, she pressed. Indeed, the disciple of one of the monks left behind a diary that contained hints about where the device was hidden. However, his descriptions could have been referring to any number of locations on the Taymore Terra. The Duchess ran one finger around the rim of her tankard thoughtfully. Suppose that this Tideweaver could be recovered. Could such a device be incorporated into a modern monster defense system? Could it perhaps be used to repair the Taymore colony's defenses? Ta'ajib raised one shoulder and cocked his head. It is impossible to say. All we know about this device is what was passed down to us from hundreds of years ago. We have no idea how it might have worked, or if it even still exists. There would also be the matter of locating and recovering the device. There are some things we will never know. Yes indeed. Well, thank you. What did you say your name was? You have been very helpful. Lillian Astor waved Ta'ajib away without waiting for a response and turned to Thorn. I would say this is quite exciting. What do you think? Thorn wasn't ready for the question. It seemed clear to him that the Tideweaver was as obtainable of a goal as finding the goose that laid golden eggs. From what Ta'ajib said, it sounds like Quinty scholars have been trying unsuccessfully to find the Tideweaver for hundreds of years. Why would we be any different? Why was she clinging to this idea in the first place? Was she really that desperate to save money? She waved a hand dismissively. Yes, the Quinty have been searching for that device for generations, but we have something that they never had. She tapped her temple. A royal Parisseran education. We have far more learning at our disposal than the entire Quinty scholastic world combined. Thorn paused for a moment as he winced internally from Lady Astor's arrogance. Lady Astor, with all due respect, I think it seems rather more logical to pursue the crystals that we know we can find, rather than try to locate a device from an ancient Quinty legend. Please call me Lillian, and I am confident that I can solve this little puzzle for you. My family did not become wealthy by coincidence. Now, Captain. Lillian slid down from her bar stool. Take me home.
Thank you for listening to A Taymore Deception. Tune in every Wednesday for new chapters.